And in the field service, what we are looking, there's several buzzwords which we know, and one of them everyone have heard, but we talked about that a bit last year, but this year we talk a bit from different angle. Servitization. So what exactly is that? So we know, like, theoretically, what is that? How to implement. And today I have a speaker here who will talk about that, and he will talk about the topics which we will see in implementing here in the companies after 3-5 years. So what I kindly ask you, I invite you to listen to the future, right? And here we have today Dr. Daniel Andrew from Aston Business School.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yannis. Thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you very much for having me. I'm from Aston Business School in the UK. I guess the person from England that Yannis was alluding to earlier. We have been looking at servitization in the UK for a long time. So it's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to try and convey within the next 20 minutes or so a condensed summary of the research we've been doing. The unit I work in, my boss is Professor Tim Baines. He's the foremost scholar in the area of servitization, and we're very much of the philosophy that we work directly with businesses. I started at Aston 9 years ago, and we just started forming what we called the Advanced Services Practitioner Partnership, whereby, and this started because my boss had written a book, and someone from Goodyear read this book and said, it's a very lonely place trying to servitize on your own. You should try and start a club where businesses can come together and start talking about this journey amongst themselves. Very much like what Arunus is attempting to do with this consortium. And over the last 10 years, this has grown and expanded, and we've grown into doing not only research, but also we have a spin-out company now that does consultancy. We offer advisory services and training. And although I'm on the academic side, and I have friends and colleagues over in the spin-out of the business side, we're very much interlinked. So a lot of the work I do is related to a lot of the work we do as a group with businesses. But to Yannis's question, what is servitization? Well, basically, it's moving from this picture in the top left to the picture at the top right. The top left is the traditional model of manufacturing and consuming products. The customer chooses it. The customer then has to monitor it, has to identify consumables, has to repair, at the end of life, has to dispose of it. Servitization basically means you go from that to the manufacturer pretty much doing everything. The manufacturer selects the product for the customer, the manufacturer identifies and monitors the product, makes sure that it's fit for the customer's use. This could mean overhauling the product. It could also mean selecting a completely different product if it's identified that the original selection is no longer fit for purpose. And at end of life, it means taking the product back and disposing of it. Now, we in the Advanced Services Group distinguish between three broad categories of services. Base services are essentially the services that every manufacturer has to offer, because it's a legal requirement to do so, right? If you, within the first, however long it is that is defined within the country in which the product is sold, you have to provide a certain level of service. Traditionally, that was all that manufacturers were concerned about, and this is, I think, where we're seeing a move away from that model is in the realm of field service, because it's been become increasingly, people are becoming increasingly aware that there's opportunity to make money in what we call intermediate services. Now, of course, technology is key to that, because you need to be able to get insight into how the product is being used, and this is where you start to offer repairs, maintenance, overhaul. Even remote monitoring can even result in help desk training and support and providing advisory services. But what I want you to try and consider, and what you may not have considered before, is what we call advanced services. It's what the group is what the group's named. It's what we're really pressing for. The reason we get a lot of attention back home is because it's recognized that advanced services really are where UK manufacturing and services are going to be able to make the most money, basically. It's where it's going to potentially take that whole sector out of what is currently a race to the bottom, whereby everyone's trying to outdo each other based on price and performance of the product. And it's recognized in the UK, well, it's becoming increasingly recognized back home and in North America, that that's not sustainable. Okay, but what do I mean by advanced services? Well, we've come up with what we call the servitization staircase. All of these toolkits, by the way, are free on our website, advancedservicesgroup.co.uk. And it's a way to try and visualize how you could go up the staircase if you wanted to try and provide advanced services to your customer, or if you are the customer, how you could create that pool with whoever your service provider is to get that level of service you require. Again, as I said, base services at the bottom, that's the one everyone's traditionally familiar with. At the bottom, we provide the product. Just above that, we provide spare parts for the product. Intermediate services, yeah, we restore the condition of the products. We guarantee our performance in restoring the condition of the products, and we start to capture more value from the products as we go into performance advisory. And the process of going up towards the top of the staircase is called servitization, where now we're starting to look at the outcomes of this for the customer. And if you're the customer, you're starting to say to your provider, what outcomes do we want from this? What is it? Do we actually care about the condition of this product, or is it actually what the result of using that product is within our overall system, our overall operations? Now, digitalization tends to focus on this section, base and intermediate services, which tends to be the remit of field services. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's great to be able to do what you weren't able to do as quickly or as effectively before, almost instantly these days. But we still argue that that's essentially what you did before, just a lot quicker, faster, and better. For example, fixing things before they go wrong, predictive maintenance. Well, in the past, if you didn't have digital technology, through the provision of a service, in the past you would say, okay, well, we now have intelligence as to how we can help prevent that in the future. Digital technology helps you do that a lot more quickly. We now have telematics that show how the machine is being used, which can help with advisory services. We always wanted to, in field service, and by the way, field service back home was pretty well established when I started at Aston 9 years ago. There was always this desire to understand patterns over time within the customer's operations. Now, people are talking about, well, this is something that AI can do for us, therefore making it much quicker and much better than we could possibly have ever done manually before. But we still think that that is more of the same, just a lot better and quicker. When we start to go into advanced services, we're actually asking, when we talk to our manufacturers, we're asking them to consider, okay, but what does that product actually do for the customer? What's the output of the product? And the way we ask our clients and our customers to do that is to say, where does that product fit into the customer's operations? So if you're the customer, you would go to your service provider and say, well, this is where our product sits within our system. There are all sorts of issues here related to data sharing and trust and so on and so forth. But the idea here is that you become partners with the service provider or the customer. And you're making the process, trying to make the process overall more efficient and effective. And the way this works in terms of a business model and a revenue generation model is that the incentives become aligned and shared. So if the customer gets an outcome from this, then that's when the service provider also receives an outcome. And this is called a kind of pay-per-outcome revenue model. Rather than just subscribing to a certain package that you've said, out of a range of packages, we'd like to pick this one, you're now saying to the provider, we want outcomes from this, and we want them guaranteed, and we're going to share revenue based on this. As it becomes more complicated and you get to the top of the staircase, that's when you start to target not just the customer's system, or you start to consider not just your system, but where your system fits within the whole value network. And this is when you're really starting to talk about a whole new business model where, as a service provider, we're saying we're not just interested in our customers' outcomes, we're now looking at who our customers' customers are. And as it gets more complicated, it could be our customer's customer's customer, etc. Basically, everyone who has a stake in the outcome of this system. And this is where we think, and the word value is very important in this context, we think this is where real value generation can be gained. Now, I'm going to show you a video, I hope, if it works.
A brief introduction to advanced services and digital transformation. Not so long ago, manufacturers found it difficult to engage with their customers. Inside the factory, great care would be taken to make the best product possible, but once the product left the factory, the manufacturer was in the dark. Digital technologies give manufacturers more insight into their products by providing data into how equipment is functioning in real time. This means the manufacturer can react quickly if performance drops. Advanced services help exploit digital technologies much further. Rather than just reacting to the product, the manufacturer also responds to the customer, adjusting its offering based on the customer's evolving needs. On one hand, digital technologies will help deliver these advanced services. On the other hand, advanced services will capture the value of digitalization by using technologies that can help identify and deliver value for the customer. This means the manufacturer will do much more than simply monitor and maintain its products. It will use advanced services to deliver sustained growth for everyone connected in the value chain. For further information, visit the Advanced Services Group website.
So that's me trying to condense the theory into about 5 or 10 minutes. What does that look like in practice? So this section, please don't record, or at least don't share afterwards, just pointing that out. So the one that everyone refers to back home, Rolls-Royce's power by the hour. Now, in terms of the kind of established model of digitally enhanced intermediate services, you can probably have a good guess as to what they currently do in terms of predictive maintenance. Basically, using sensors on the engine to do, and things like increasingly augmented reality, so on and so forth, to do engine health monitoring, which helps with predictive maintenance and therefore no unscheduled downtime, okay? So that's pretty straightforward. But in terms of looking at it from an advanced services perspective and looking at the whole platform in which this engine sits, you start to see that that engine is, although gas turbine engines are quite massive, they're actually quite small components within the whole platform in which that aeroplane operates. And Rolls-Royce have systems in place where they can monitor that in real time. and provide advisory services to the customers in real time. To the extent that if the engine is on, and it doesn't need to be, they can say to the pilot, you should turn one of those engines off. Now, why would they do that? Well, from a service point of view, if the engine isn't on when it doesn't need to be, then there are fewer interventions required in that engine, okay? So less service is needed. So that's a good incentive for Rolls-Royce. But from the customer's point of view, that also affects total cost of ownership because the engine isn't using as much fuel as it needs to. So advanced services is all about aligning those objectives. What's in it for us as the service provider, as the manufacturer? What's in it for the customer? And how do we put a value on that? How do we model that and then calculate that as value for the customer that we can then charge as a service for us as a service offering? An interesting point here is that I think worth mentioning as well briefly. Rolls-Royce, I'm part of the Through Life Engineering Services Council at Rolls-Royce, and it's an interesting site because you have the factory, which is like a traditional factory where you've got very huge, impressive pieces of equipment, and next to it looks like it's a completely different business, which is the same size building, just full of PCs, and in the middle of that building are 24-hour news channels. And the level of service they're able to provide is to be able to say, we're monitoring all of our engines in real time for all of our customers. And we're also correlating those data with news so that we can basically see if there are any anomalies going on within any of our planes, we can match those up to potentially any international incidents that might be going on. It's all about being able to get the most relevant and insightful data they can to be able to provide the best service possible. Sometimes that even means abandoning some data if it's irrelevant. A story someone told me from Rolls-Royce when they did an audit into their data, they realized that there was a room in one of their buildings that was full of hard drives. And when they said, what's this room for? A colleague said, well, that's data. When they did an investigation, they actually realized they didn't need as many sensors in their engine as they had. Some of the data they were getting was obviously redundant, and therefore they were able to be more strategic moving forward about what the most valuable data was. Quick look at something that's much lower value equipment, but still very important in the context in which I'm working. In the UK, by the year 2025, in all new homes, gas boilers must be replaced by low-carbon heating. And one of the companies we work with is Baxi Boilers. And basically, their bread and butter, as we would call it, is to make gas boilers. So this is an interesting situation for them. They may take comfort in the fact that the only viable alternative to gas boilers at the moment are heat pumps. And at the rate of adoption at the moment in the UK, it's going to take over 1,000 years to change from gas boilers to heat pumps. So clearly this target, which the government came up with of 2025, is not going to be met. But what is the point of just focusing on the product in this case? What is the actual outcome that everybody wants? Do they want to replace gas boilers with heat pumps, or is the outcome actually about energy efficiency? Now, Baxi traditionally have had okay relationships with their service providers, the installers, but over recent years, because of this, they've become much more involved in the process, to the point where they're actually advising their installers and service providers to try and do audits of their customers' homes in which the boiler is so that they can talk about efficiency much more broadly. You know, what does the customer actually want? Do they want a boiler that is more efficient than the competition? Do they want a heat pump that's more efficient than a gas boiler? Or do they want a warm home? Do they want low costs? And do they want no downtime? And actually, when you look at the problem with UK housing, it's not with, I mean, of course, there's an issue with the consumption of gas, but the boilers are a very, very small part of that. Actually, most of the heat is being lost within the environment in which the boiler sits. And that's where the opportunities for the services really are, in our view. That's the outcome people actually want. Very quick example here of just to show how servitization can even be applied to something that's purely commoditized. I appreciate that this isn't going to be entirely relevant to you, but it's just a nice example of a company that does wooden pallets. You'd think, wooden pallets, I mean, there's nothing to that technology. Surely a wooden pallet is a wooden pallet. Actually, through collaborations with us and through other universities, they came up with a whole different approach, a different value proposition based on efficient packaging as a service, which was more expensive than the competition, but where they used digital technologies was through things like finite element analysis and the use of reduction of waste in the packaging to make it as safe and secure as possible, but at the same time using as little space as possible, so that their customers could actually rest assured that their product was going to get from one place to another and as efficiently as and as many products from one place to another in one go, and through the use of remote monitoring technology to see and make sure that that was going on. Whereas the competition weren't in a position to be able to do that, and through traditional tender processes, they were able to outdo the competition, even though the offering they were suggesting to their customers was more expensive, because ultimately it was more valuable. Okay, so, and I'm conscious of the time. Digital technologies, the higher you go, the more opportunities, we argue, is the kind of essential point I'm trying to make with this presentation. As I said earlier on, digital technologies tend to be focused on the base and the intermediate side of services. Essentially, it helps you do the same thing you did before, but a lot better. And what we'd like you to consider is whether a change in your business model is where the real opportunity lies. And by the way, there's no restrictions on this part of the presentation. So, as you go up the staircase, you're starting to create different value propositions, which may result in completely different KPIs than you had before. Because the KPIs traditionally are all about the product and how the product needs to function. In this context, it's all about the wider, broader ramifications of what the customer actually wants. An example might be, in the Samsung case, if the customer has energy efficiency requirements, then you may be in a position as a service provider to say, similarly to Rolls-Royce, maybe you should turn your devices off now. We've noticed from monitoring this that some devices are on when they don't need to be. It's just a different mindset and a different approach to thinking about what the customer's problems and challenges and potential solutions actually are. But it is a risky process. But you need to ask yourselves, what's the risk of not doing it? Or we would encourage you to ask that. Because otherwise, what you're doing is essentially it's a race to the bottom. If you're not looking at alternative, newer business models which are focused on the outcomes for your customers, you're ultimately not differentiating yourselves from your competition. And everything you're doing is all about trying to do the same thing you did before, but better and more efficiently. We've worked on a project, and this is very much from a UK perspective, but we've done a research project where we've looked at how digitalization goals and the digitalization culture can help with making business cases in this area and help with creating new opportunities for newer value propositions. I'm down to my last 17 seconds. So unfortunately, I'm just going to have to race through. There was a video, I'll just skip past that. But it's all on the website. A lot of our stuff is available for free online. If you're interested in this, I would encourage you to look at these links, try them yourself. This one, Unlock Your Insight, that's a way in which you can see and map your own competitive strategy based on what you're doing now and what you're doing in the future. And it may give you an idea as to whether servitization and advanced services are right for you. A lot of it is free. There is a few bits behind a paywall, but please do get in touch if this might be something of interest. Unfortunately, I can't stay for the party later, but I will be around over lunch if anyone's got any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Yanis.
Thank you for your speech. And we have one question. Please don't leave us.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Beg your pardon.
I don't think I will be able to reply to that one. So, first question: What are your insights? Which industries are offering most advanced services, and which basic services? Do you have that kind of data?
So, the one slide I had to rush past. Thank you for answering that, asking that question, because one of the slides was showing that this isn't restricted to any particular sector or size of organization. Personally, I've worked with over 450 businesses now, because we have a lot of SMEs within the West Midlands, hundreds of them. And when we were part of the EU, we had funding to be able to deliver our business model training to those companies for free. And there are so many different sectors in the West Midlands, but they all, for all of them, there were opportunities to do advanced services. So really, for us, it's not about the sector, it's about the culture and the mindset within the organization. And that can be as particular and specific as the company you're talking to.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks a lot.
I think everyone can use the option as well during the breaks to catch up with the speakers and ask your questions as I mentioned. So I have talked with some of you, and some companies think, yeah, look, so we have tractors or something like that. So how we can do that? So that's exactly the question which you can ask and catch up with any of the speakers, previous or the next ones, right now. So now I'm announcing a coffee break, and when you will hear the band, I'm welcoming you back. So take a network, please.